I was wondering why your message is so hard for people to recognize, why it doesn't come more naturally to them.
Well, the younger you are, the more naturally it comes, because you remember it. You remember that you're worthy, you remember you're good, you remember things are supposed to go well for you. You remember
in children, right.
And so your question really is about, why can't I set my radio dial on one frequency and hear what's being broadcast on another? That's really the question you just asked. In other words, if you can't hear us, it's because we're broadcasting on a frequency that's different than you can hear.
More so how people don't know that they have the choice. I'm here, I'm listening to you. I'm not necessarily asking for myself. But how people can spend a lifetime without ever getting a clue that they have a choice or that they can take a path that makes them feel better. Instead, they're focused on reality. Reality is everything.
Well, we can understand how that can happen, because once something manifests, a lot of people agree about it. You call it fact, you call it evidence, you make monuments about it, you write it down in historical documents.
We can see it, we can
You make
hear
a
it.
big, hairy deal over reality. And we make an effort to diffuse that. We say things that we think are enlightened and brilliant, like reality doesn't mean diddly squat. Because it's just the manifestation of energy that's been in motion. Most people offer most of their vibration in response to the manifestation that they are observing. So once something becomes fact, then people have a feeling that they should talk about it, that if it's fact, then we should write it down and we should discuss it and we should objectively make it part of our vocabulary. And we say, the thing about that we are wanting to help you to understand so that you will deliberately divert yourself from that is that this is a universe that's based on inclusion. So there's no exclusion. When you see something you want and you say yes to it, you include it in your vibration. But when you see something and you say no to it, you include it in your vibration. So there's no such thing as no. And if people understood that, then they would be more particular about the things that they give their attention to. People will sometimes say to us, Abraham, it needs my attention or it deserves my attention because after all, it's true. And we say, what you're really saying is somebody gave that their attention long enough that they manifested it. And because they manifested it and now made it evidence, then I should give my attention to it also. And we say, there are a lot of things that are true. Everything that you see around you is true. Everything is true.
Right.
Diseases are true. Poverty is true. Starvation is true.
And all the positive aspects
Thriving
are true.
is true.
Right.
And so don't look at it just because it's true. Be much more particular than that.
I guess what I'm saying, it would have been a nice little bonus if human beings were born with more of a
Guidance,
potential.
with guidance.
With more
yes,
of a
maybe.
more of a potential to know that they had the guidance, because a lot of people don't, and it doesn't seem to come to them naturally.
Well, what would you like? Your teeth to fall out? What guidance could be more significant than the elation that you feel when you're moving toward what you want and the sadness that you feel when you are moving away from it? In other words, it seems like the perfect plan. What's happened is people have become accustomed to the discomfort of varying degrees of negative emotion. And so it's a disregard for feeling good. So what it really is, the answer to your question is, somehow many people have come to the place where they've become convinced that it matters more that they satisfy someone outside of them than that they satisfy what's coming forth from inside them. So, for example, someone might do something that they really don't want to do because it's expected of them, because they don't want to disappoint someone else. And we say, that's setting your own guidance aside. One of the things we're encouraging Jerry and Esther to write a book that says, I don't give a rip what you think.
Good one.
Because the sooner people around you understand that you've decided to begin using your own guidance system, then the sooner they will stop the antics that they do to try to control your behavior or get you to do something other than what's best for you. Don't you just love the Magellan story, where Magellan calculates the route and calculates the distance and difference between where you are and where you want to be, and then says, please proceed to the highlighted route, and throws a fit when you deviate from it. When possible, make a legal U-turn. When possible, make a legal U-turn. In other words, she just kicks up a terrible squawk when you divert from the highlighted route, you see. And your guidance system does the same thing. You launch all these things into vibrational escrow. Source agrees with all of them and says, come this way, come this way, come this way. This is the way to the things you want. And when you go that way, you feel the discord. And now you are alert to what that discord means. Now you start feeling for thoughts, words, and actions that give you the relief, that let you know you're back on your path. But if you've been listening to those outside of you instead of to that gut instinct or that feeling, then...
But I guess my question is that people do tend to do that naturally. Everybody's known a lot of people that lived in their whole life in a rut. And I know a part of my life was in a rut. And during that time, I didn't know that I had the choice. I was just responding to reality.
People like you come along, or people like Jerry and Esther, who write a book, who leave a clue, who live happily ever after, who do their best to demonstrate and teach by the clarity of example. And children are born every day who still remember it. Parents think that they're teaching their children when the opposite is true. The children come forth all fresh and bright, wanting to remind the others, and the dilution ratio is really wonderful because the old ornery ones are croaking while the new good-feeling ones are coming in, you see. And also, you know that idea of the pendulum swinging? What that's about is that the contrast that you're living causes you, sometimes when you really know what you don't want, to launch a rocket of desire about what you do want. And so very often your civilization will be in the place where, as a mass consciousness, you are summoning a whole lot of energy. That's what's going on right now. We have never seen energy moving as swiftly as it is with the human population on this planet today. You are mixing it up with one another, and you are sending off rockets of desire, and you are summoning the energy in greater proportion and faster speed than we've ever seen any time. And so what that means is the energy is moving faster. Your awareness of where you are within it is becoming more apparent. So more and more people are waking up to the awareness that by feeling a little better, things go better. 10 years ago, people were not nearly ready for this message. Jerry and Esther can remember the small groups that were gathering and even the reluctance of those small groups. And now they are hearing and reading Abraham's message everywhere. Teachers all over the planet are ringing with the truth of it and expressing it in their way and in their way and in their way. People are rediscovering the power. The joy level of your planet is increasing exponentially, you see. And you knew when you were born into this exaggerated contrast that this would be the time of awakening, a time when more people would get themselves crossways of the energy, which would stimulate even stronger desire to feel better. You know why we don't worry about any of it? You are all, we are all of us are all of us are selfishly wired, which means we all care about the way we feel. So the guidance system that is set up is exactly right. And so it just takes a little bit of recognizing the correlation between what I'm thinking and feeling and what's manifesting before I start realizing that I can control my own experience. Even Esther, as much as she knows, sometimes will step outside of that and really expect to be able to demand that the world just treat her better so that she can feel better.
Right, yeah.
But the world never cooperates. It never gives her that misunderstanding. In other words, it just doesn't. There is not a shred of evidence to the contrary of law of attraction as we express it to you.
Right.
So when you say, why don't we get it? We want to throw the same thing back to you. It seems preposterous to us too.
Okay, then I guess.
We think you do get it. In other words, we think that everyone knows that they want to feel good. And we think that without exception, you know when you don't. We think where the disconnect comes for most people is that they have not yet made the conscious association that they can affect the way they feel by choosing other thoughts.
Right.
People still, for the most part, believe that if they could change the circumstance, so let's vote in a president that will do what we need to do, or let's get enough money together that we can drop enough bombs that we can try to control enough. In other words, there are all kinds of scenarios that play out in the name of controlling the conditions that make me feel uncomfortable. Right. But in the same way that Esther and Jerry reached a sort of crescendo where it really came down to the fact that they understand they have no choice but to clean up their vibration. They have no choice. In other words, you just can't not clean up your vibration and get the results that you want. And as a mass population, you're on the brink of discovering that too. You just cannot push hard against so many things that you do not want without exponentially exaggerating those things that you do not want. In other words, you cannot push hard enough against the terrorists to make them go away. The harder you push, the more of them crop up. In other words, they're coming up everywhere in response to your war on terror. And usually governmental agencies do not change their direction until something falls of its economic weight. And then they rethink it. And so this, like everything, will fall of its economic weight, and then off you'll go again in another direction. But in all of it, all is well. Don't need them to figure it out. You just figure it out and let your world be wonderful.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much.